This is the One Girl Revolution podcast, a podcast that highlights the stories of world-changing women and girls across the country. We hope that these stories inspire you, but even more so, we hope that these stories help you to see your own value, your purpose, and your power to change the world through your life. Every woman and girl is a One Girl Revolution. This week on the One Girl Revolution podcast, I had the privilege of speaking with Andrea Mustin, a beacon of light and resilience and the founder of Sisters Taking on the Prevention of Suicide, also known as STOPS. Andrea's journey to STOPS began with a devastating loss. Her husband, Eric, died by suicide in 2013 after struggling with bipolar disorder, depression, and anxiety. The shock and grief left Andrea searching for a way to make sense of it all, and she felt a deep calling to make a difference and help others. In 2015, she turned her pain into purpose, founding STOPS to raise awareness about suicide, provide resources, support, and community, and to help prevent others from facing the tragedy of suicide. In this deeply moving conversation, Andrea opens up about her personal journey, the importance of mental health advocacy, and the incredible work STOPS is doing to help others prevent suicide, raise awareness, and empower individuals and communities. Join us as we explore how each of us can make a difference in suicide prevention and how we can each bring hope, love, and support to those who need it most. Here's my conversation with Andrea. Andrea, welcome to the One Girl Revolution podcast.
Thank you so much, Kate. And we really sincerely appreciate you reaching out to us and giving us this wonderful opportunity to share our story. So thank you so much.
Well, I am so excited to have you on to talk about the incredible work that you're doing, but also your own story, because I truly believe that every single woman and girl has the power to change the world through their lives. And sometimes we go through difficult moments in our lives, painful moments, tremendous suffering, but there is so much power in our stories to lead us to where we are supposed to be and to who we're becoming, which I know is so much a part of your story. And so I'm so excited to have you on. You and I connected and you had asked me, we talked on the phone a couple of weeks ago. And fun fact for everybody who's listening, we actually recorded a podcast episode and it didn't take for some reason, but neither of us believe in coincidences. So there's obviously a reason why we're here re-recording. But you had asked me when we spoke the first time about how I found your story and how I found out about STOPS. And I still can't really remember. I just remember like Googling around, and that's the power of social media, that I stumbled upon your story. And so I want to talk about STOPS. I want to talk about the incredible work that you're doing. But before we get into that, Andrea, I would love to rewind and I would love to hear a little bit about your own story, who you are, where you're from, and maybe a little bit of what led you to what you're doing today.
Absolutely. My pleasure. So first off, I love the Lord and I'm a Bible believing Christian. So, but I was born in Wisconsin and raised in Texas. And I come from a family of 5. My parents are deceased, and I have an older brother and a younger sister. I was your typical teenager, your average teenager. I loved Michael Jackson and Leif Garrett. I had posters of them throughout my walls. I worked at Wendy's. I was pretty social. I had some girlfriends that I hung out with. And I worked at Wendy's while I was in school. And then I went to college. And my first professional job was working at a 24-bed acute hospital. And I worked in the data entry department. And I was responsible for leading a staff of 3 ladies. So shortly thereafter, I met Eric. And I would call him Eric Barbaric or Monsieur Eric. But I met Eric. We met in 1994.
Tell me about that. Tell me about when you met Eric. I know he obviously is such a big part of your life and still a part of your journey and led you to what you're doing today. But talk to me about Eric and how you fell in love with him and just a little bit about your story.
Absolutely. Well, let me share about Eric. Eric, too, was born in Wisconsin. So God's already connecting the dots. And I believe, he family lived in Texas. So they resided in Texas, and then he moved to California, and he worked over in the Bay Area, driving tour buses. And then he moved back to Texas to I guess be with family. And we met, like I said, in 1994, and he was just tall, dark, and handsome. And, I would say I found my Mr. Right, with his last name being Wright. But he was a over the road truck driver when we met. So he would haul products various places within the country. So we would see each other maybe every other week. So, I was just really, really excited. He was just so warm and friendly. He had a dog by the name of Hooch. And I'm not sure if you've ever seen the movie Turner and Hooch. That was Eric's Hooch. He was a beautiful chocolate Shar Pei, but Hooch had a little drool problem. And I love to tell the story. The first time that Eric took me on a date, he wanted me to meet Hooch, and we were going to go to the park. So I drove to his house, and he got Hooch, and he opened up we went to the car, and he opened up, the door, and Hooch jumped in the passenger seat. So I said, okay. By the way, I didn't like dogs back then, but I said, okay, I really want to impress this guy, so let me love on his dog. So Eric said, Hooch, get in the back seat. And I was like, no, that's fine. That's fine. He goes, no, let him get in the back seat. So Hooch got in the back seat, and I sat in the front. And Hooch put his jaw on my shoulder. And I was like, oh, he's loving me. Well, that's when the drools began. I could feel him drooling down the side of my back. But in essence, that's the similarity that he had with Turner and Hooch, that he had a thyroid problem, and he drooled. But that was Eric's dog. And I really think that, you think about service dogs. Now I really think that Hooch was Eric's service dog back then. But we eventually got closer, and we moved to Houston, and Eric earned what's called his CDL endorsements. And so these CDL endorsements allowed him to drive different types of trucks and to haul different types of freight, to include hazardous materials. So, that opened up the door for a lot of job opportunities in the Houston area for him. Eric was a gentleman. He was warm, he was kind, he was friendly, a gentle giant, because he was 6'3", and I think he weighed maybe 250 pounds. He was the, loving son, brother, uncle, cousin, brilliant. The man was smart. We would watch Jeopardy, and he would answer all the questions. And I'd look at him like, how do you know that? How in the world do you know that? He was brilliant. He was brilliant. He loved music. He loved to cook. And he was my best friend. We grew up together. We'd been together for 20 years. We grew up together. So he was my best friend. Fast forward, he lived with bipolar and depression and anxiety. And the man who I considered to be my soulmate, died by suicide on December 2nd, 2013. And I didn't even see it coming. I didn't see it coming. So that was the beginning of how Stops started, or it was kind of like a proof of concept, if you will.
Yeah, well, and I'm so glad you shared about Eric, because I think it's so important for us to talk about our loved ones, and their legacy continues through our stories about them and our memories about them. But also his legacy continues through Stops and the work that you're doing to elevate such an important, such a critical conversation. People that are listening, they might not think that they have a connection to suicide, but the reality is it's such an epidemic in our world, and we need to be talking about it, and we need to have resources available. And even if we don't think that we have a connection to suicide, or we don't think that we know someone who is struggling with bipolar disorder or depression, we need to do what we can to elevate the conversation. And so you're doing that through Stops, and I'm so honored to have you on and get to share about the work. What can you tell me, Andrea, about that day? Because I know that and it's whatever you feel comfortable sharing. But I know for so many people, it is a shock. Unfortunately, that's the story for so many people when it comes to suicide. It's just a moment. There aren't necessarily these red flags or signs that show that somebody might be thinking in that way. It can oftentimes come as a shock. And I know that's your story.
Yeah, and and thank you for that. And I wanted to share if historical statistics are correct. 80% of us will know someone who will die by suicide, with 20% of those individuals being family members. 80%. So yeah, back to the day, without, long story short, I remember Eric woke up early. I think it was a Saturday morning. I don't know if it was a Saturday or Sunday morning, and I heard the front door open. I just assumed, oh, he's going outside like he normally would go. Maybe he's going outside to just walk around but anyway, I went back to bed. And then when I woke up, I called out his name and he wasn't in the house. So I went to see if his car was in the driveway, and it wasn't. So I was like, well, where did he go? And so I called his cell, and I could hear it ringing in the other room. And I said, oh man, he forgot his phone. So I went in the other room and I picked up his phone, and I saw that he had Googled pain in the brain. Mind you, like you said, there were, I know now, based on my training, warning signs were there. They were there. Back then, I did not know. We'd been together for 20 years. So his behavior, whenever he was going through an episode, it was always this too will pass. But on this day, I waited and I waited and I waited for him to come home. And long story short, I went into the office and I found a letter from him that said, Angie, it's my nickname. I don't know where we got Angie from Andrea, but Angie, that's my nickname. And he said, I love you, I love you, I love you. I'm so sorry. You were the only thing that I ever had. I love you, I love you. I'm so tired. I'm so tired. Take care of Mother Earth. So when I read that, the furthest thing on my mind was suicide. That was, I didn't even make any type of connection. I just thought, my poor husband, he's out and about, struggling. And he wrote me this letter, and he'd never written a letter before. So I waited and I waited and I waited, and it got to be late. So I called the police to file a missing person report. And they had asked questions, had you all been in an argument? No. Well, did something happen? I said, yeah, something happened at work, but, everything was fine. That's what I thought. They called me, say, maybe an hour later and said, hey, we found his car, so we'll give you a call when we get to him. And I said, okay, great. Well, an hour passed, and then there was, the doorbell rang. And I said to myself, oh no, I have seen this on TV so many times, where it's the police coming to share some bad news. So I went and I opened up the door, and that was the case. The police said that your husband had died by suicide. And I shared the last time you and I talked that, I immediately turned it around and comforted them by letting them know how I appreciated them coming and telling me, and how difficult, it was for them to be the bearer of bad news. And they extended their apologies and then walked away. And I just remember when I shut the door, I just felt, I was in shock and disbelief. I felt alone, but Eric, because of his work schedule, there were times when I was alone, a lot of times, but this time it was a different type of aloneness. And then I thought to myself, okay, both of your parents have died. You've gone through this. And I said to myself, but this is a different type of death. He took his life. This is different. So a lot of things changed for me that night. I couldn't sleep in our bedroom. It took me 2 years to be able to sleep in our bed. I no longer could dream. I would just go to bed and I wouldn't have dreams. You know, there are times when I'm still in disbelief. And I think I'm in disbelief. You know, it's still new, it's still very raw, but to know that he felt he had no other option but to do that, and that he couldn't, for whatever reason, talk to his wife. The thing that rings in my mind is maybe he tried to, and you didn't know. Maybe he showed the signs and you didn't know. Again, fast forward, there were warning signs there. And there were some things that he said. There were a few things that he said that, you know, would have now, you know, I would have responded differently.
Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at One Girl Revo. That's the number One Girl REVO. We're on TikTok at One Girl Revolution, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel at One Girl Revolution. That's the number One Girl Revolution. You can find all of our social media links, previous podcast episodes, our Emmy-nominated documentary series, and more on our website at onegirlrevolution.com. That's the number onegirlrevolution.com. It's so important for us to be educated. That's why conversations like this are so important. Like I said before, it's like, even if you think that you don't have a connection, we're always going to come in contact or encounter people that are struggling, or us ourselves are going to have moments where we're struggling, and knowing how to ask for help or knowing who to ask for help with, or if you know someone who shares something with you, to look for those red flags and say, like, hey, do you want to go here or talk about this? Or I know this resource. Like, helping one another. Community is so important in our world. And the reality is that it is an epidemic, and it's happening everywhere. And it's absolutely heartbreaking when I read stories about it happening with children, right? I think that social media has really elevated that, suicide amongst young people. Bullying is happening. So we all need to be aware of what's going on and the resources that are available. And like your story, I was recently watching an interview with, we mentioned before, Allison Holker Boss. Her husband was Twitch from the Ellen DeGeneres show, and she was talking about when it first happened, she couldn't find him, similar to your story. And then she finally called the police, and there was no alcohol, there was no drugs, no history of suicidal ideation, and it just happened. It was one day, one moment, and she's so strong, just like you're so strong. And I am so blown away by the women who have just stepped forward to share their stories with regards to suicide. And now, like you're doing something to change it through stops.
Oh, thank you for that. And you know, when I first heard about Stephen's passing, I cried, and I felt for Allison. I felt like I knew exactly what she was going through. I felt like I wanted to pick up the phone and call her and say, I'm here. I feel what you're going through. I've been there. You don't have to say, I just want you to know, if you need anything, I'm here. And I think of, and exactly the same steps, it appears, you know, Stephen left the home kind of in a frantic state. Eric, he left the home. I didn't know he was in a frantic state. Stephen went to a hotel. Eric went to an abandoned home. Stephen, they said, you know, had the gun. Eric had a gun too, but he hung himself. But the gun was there as well. So, you know, and even to this very day, I still feel her, and I just applaud her for being strong. And she has children that she had to go home and talk to. And I think of, I have two beautiful nieces, and they were young and they loved their uncle. And I think of the conversation that my brother-in-law had with them. He took them aside and had that conversation with them. And I tell you, those girls, they're strong girls. And when they talk about Uncle Eric, it's in a positive way. So whatever my brother-in-law said to them gave them hope, and it looks like Allison has done the same thing with her kids. And yeah, you're absolutely right. I would watch them dance, with the kids, and they just look so happy. And I remember when Eric died, I reached out to some friends to say, hey, I'm going to be moving. My husband died. He died by suicide. And so they posted on social media, to pray for my friend. Her husband died by suicide. And you just don't know. People are smiling, but you just don't know what's going on in their households. And I said to myself, well, there was nothing going on we were smiling in the household. I didn't see anything. Yeah, Eric would get really upset if he had problems with the computer. Eric would get really upset if a gadget wasn't working in the kitchen, or if there was problems, he was trying to change the oil on his car. And he would get upset to where he'd have to go lay down. But this was a behavior that I saw from day one. So, on the outside, it may look like to others there might have been chaos, inside the home. That's not always the case. So, yeah, I want to thank you for just giving us this opportunity, this platform to talk. And that's where you start. You have these conversations because, the stigma is so real. People don't want to talk about it, but what they don't realize is in most cases, 1 in 5 people, and in some cases, 1 in 3 people are living with a mental illness. You may not want to talk about it, but if there's 4 people in the room and you excuse yourself, one of those people is living with a mental illness, and we need to talk about it.
Well, and death is already awkward enough. I know when my mom died, there were certain people that didn't even know what to say, right? So it can be awkward, and suicide is even more so. It's like, what do you say to somebody? And we need to say something. And sometimes it's not even what we say, but it's just being there for our friends and being there for our people, whether they're struggling with something. We can all do something. And that's what this podcast is all about. All of us thinking about what are the little things that we can do in our day-to-day lives, even if it's just smiling at someone or saying hello to a stranger. You never know what someone is struggling with. And we can sometimes be that one little beacon of hope for people.
That's right. That's exactly right. We need to be kind. We need to be kind because you don't know if this person woke up and might have said, today's my last day, unless I find one person who's going to be kind to me. So we most definitely need a culture of kindness. And we need to feel comfortable if we see that someone is behaving in a manner that they've never behaved before. We need to be comfortable asking, is everything okay? And prepared if and when they say, no, it's not. Be prepared. Because if someone says, no, it's not, and you say, well, what do I do next, right? So yeah, it starts to me, just based on my experiences, it just starts with being kind. And I think about Eric, and over the years that we were together, he wasn't on any medication. And I think he was able to make it through because of the people that were in his circle. He did some self-care type things. But just, being kind and recognizing when someone might need help, whether they're having a mental health episode or not. We just need a culture of kindness.
I completely agree. Andrea, how did you get from that day dealing with the news about Eric to what you're doing now with Stops? I think there's so much courage. I know you've had to do a lot of healing, find a lot of healing on your own. I think about with suicide, sometimes we have to find closure on our own. We have to do a lot of work on ourselves in order to find not even closure. It's like a wound that you carry, right? But how did you get from that day to starting stops?
Yeah, so I decided I didn't want to stay in Houston. This whole journey has just been through divine intervention. I mean, I moved to the Dallas-Fort Worth area to be closer to my sister and her family. And I was just going to start life anew. I left corporate, I sold our home. We had a cat, Mr. Kitty, that I found a foster home, found him a foster home. And I moved to the DFW area. And, I met so many women. I participated in volunteer opportunities. I found a church to go to. I was just really thrilled that I could spend time with family daily if I wanted to. And it wasn't until that when I was connecting with people, they wanted to know my story. And they would say, well, do you have any children? And I said, no, I don't have any children. Well, are you married? No, no, I'm not married. My husband died unexpectedly. And they would say, well, what did he die from? And I said, it was unexpected. And they said, well, what did he die from? They kind of like pushed. And I said, well, he died by suicide. 100% of the ladies that I met either had a loved one or, a close friend who was living with a mental illness, had, a relative who died by suicide. They themselves were having thoughts of suicide. It's kind of like they felt freedom to come out of the closet, if you will, the stigma, to talk about what was going on in their world. And I really didn't know what to tell them. I listened and I was, very compassionate towards them, but I didn't know what else to tell them. And then when I moved, Eric died in December, and I moved to the DFW area in February. And I found out in May that this young lady who I knew since she was like 5 years old, she had died by suicide. And so I said, dear Lord, what's going on? I thought this only happened in my circle. What's going on? And then Robin Williams died that August. And then it appeared to me, I could be totally wrong, but it just appeared to me that everyone started talking. Everyone said, okay, we had Robin Williams. And it became common. It was a conversation that more and more people were having. So it was at that moment that I said, I think I want to be a part of this movement. Eric didn't want people to know about his mental illness, but I said, I'm talking. Everyone's talking. I'm going to go ahead and talk. I want to be a part of this movement. I reached out to an organization that was having an event, and it was for survivors of suicide. And I was really looking forward to attending the event. And the day of the event, I got in my car and I drove to the building where the event was taking place. And I sat in my car for a minute because I said, yay, I get to be around people just like me who have gone through what I've gone through. So when I walked up to the event, they had it it was at an auditorium next to a hospital. And when I walked up to the door, there was someone at the front door, and they said, well, how can I help you? And I said, well, I'm here for the event. And they said, oh, okay, come on in. And then I completely shut down. And the reason why I'm African American, Eric was Caucasian. And at the time, statistics showed that, and I think it still does, that middle-aged white men were like, the majority of the people who were dying by suicide. So when I walked into the event, it was just, I couldn't help but look around to see, okay, are there any other African Americans there? And I think there were 2 other individuals there. But I just completely shut down, and they tried to make me feel as comfortable as they possibly could. But I couldn't. I just could not feel comfortable. So I left the event and I said to myself, well, okay, well, I guess I need to find people who look like me. So I went online and I Googled mental health support groups for African Americans. And I found several websites, but either I clicked on the links and the links weren't working, or I made the phone calls. with, based on the numbers that were listed on the website, and the numbers had been disconnected. So I felt the Lord said, I have, blessed you with the talent, the treasures, the time to make a difference. Let's do this. So I went back to my home and I said, okay, I want to create something, an organization based on what I felt I needed in order to be more supportive, toward Eric. And that's kind of how STOPS came about.
So for people that are listening, STOPS stands for Sisters Taking on the Prevention of Suicide. How did you get that name? How did you choose that name?
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. I assume everyone knows what STOPS
Same.
means.
I do too at this point.
Yeah. But I thought about, okay, so who are we? Okay, we're sisters. And what is it that we want to do? Well, we want to end suicide. Well, how do we want to go about doing it? And the how was what I needed to do some research on. I said, okay, well, let me look and see what, the largest grassroots effort, organizations are doing in these areas. So I came up with, okay, our how is going to be through Eric. So it's sisters taking on the prevention of suicide through education, raising resources for research, inspiring advocacy, and creating a community for women to connect. So that's how the name came together. It was, okay, STOPS. And I'm not sure if you had an opportunity to look at our logo, but our logo is a candle. Our tag is a single flame can light 1,000 candles. So it's an S with a candle in the middle. So the S represents the stop. The candle in the middle has kind of like arms raised up. So that's kind of like the T. In the center is the flame. So that's the O. And then the stick is the P. And then you can look at the top of the S as sisters and the bottom of the S as suicide. So God was just helping me. I just got so creative trying to come up with something that was meaningful, impactful, that people can embrace, that women could embrace. And so for women who have loved ones living with mental illness, we're a mental health awareness organization that provides help, hope, and support. And we do this through our 4 pillars. Education, we train women, and now we coordinate training and fund training for women where they learn about the common disorders, the signs and symptoms, and how to administer aid. We raise resources, funding resources that go toward research on suicide and suicide prevention. We reach out to Congress and ask them to support legislation that improves our mental health system. And then we create an open forum for women to come together to connect, and we share our coping strategies and relate to one another. And the key thing is that we learn that we're not alone. So we are sisters taking on the prevention of suicide through Eric.
I love everything that you're doing. And it is sad because there are a lack of resources and a lack of organizations like yours in this world, but you're accomplishing so much through sisters, bringing women together and really elevating the conversation and providing resources. And I will, of course, put your website and all the different ways that people can get in touch with you, and they can get all the resources or get in touch and figure out anything that they need. That STOPS is there, and I'll make sure that people check out your website because it is full of so much information and resources for people. I would love, Andrea, to know a story or two. I know that it can be complicated because you're dealing with real people and real people's
Yeah.
stories. But is there a story or two of maybe someone who has helped through stops, or a story that shows the power of the work that you're doing that you could share?
Absolutely. One, yes, I've got two stories. We just provided funding for three individuals to take the mental health first aid training class, and they successfully passed. So they are certified mental health first aiders. So we're really excited and happy about that. And we're looking at trying to get more sisters involved, engaged, so that we can go ahead and provide that funding and coordinate the training. Just recently, I received a message, and I call them sisters because they have loved ones living with mental illness, whether I know them or not, or personally know them or not. But she reached out. She has a relative who's having thoughts of suicide. And she found our website, didn't know what to do, didn't know where to begin. So, first off, I shared that, we're not, licensed therapists or counselors. We just have lived experiences. But, I offered listening and support, but then also resources. Um, I told her about the 988 National Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. And, people are able to call or text the crisis line if they are experiencing emotional distress. Typically, when people call the lifeline, they're having thoughts of suicide, attempting suicide, or they need someone to talk to. So when they call the crisis line, they'll get a skilled counselor, crisis counselor, who can de-escalate and offer hope, help, and resources. And the resources include the local, every state has a local 211. And you can think of that as a source of information for services that are within the community. So if you need referrals for things like housing and utilities, or food and transportation, therapy, or a licensed mental health professional, you dial 211 from your phone. So we talk about sources of help. You have 988 in the event that you're in crisis. You dial 911 in the event that it's an emergency. And then you have 211 for local resources. So, you have those three numbers that you can call whenever you're needing help. So this one individual, I followed up with them to see how they were doing, to see if they needed any additional resources. And they said, everything was great, and thanked me very much. And I said that I would follow up again. And then they reached out and said, we're interested in training. So I was able to find a trainer for them. And so we're just kind of coordinating the logistics. So that's my passion. That's my pleasure. I love connecting people with the resources that they need in order to help their loved ones and to help themselves. Just really excited about that. Really excited that we were able to, that someone reached out, found us, and they reached out for help. And, the information that we provided, they embraced and did something with it, and then came back to say, basically, we want more. We want more. We want the training. Just really, really honored, and just feeling so blessed that, we're able to provide that level of support.
Well, you are doing so much great work and providing support for so many people. And I'm so excited for people to know more about the work that you're doing. And I'm also glad that you brought up the 988 number, but also 211, because those are two great numbers that we all should have saved in our phone. So even if you are in a situation and someone shares, like you said earlier, someone shares and says, I'm not okay.
Yeah.
If we don't know how to handle that, like, hey, I actually have a number for you. Here are trained people that can walk you through it. Call 988, or I'll call with you, right? Like sitting down with someone and
Yes.
saying, I'm not going to leave you. I'm going to sit with you. Let's call this number. They're trained people that are on the other side of that phone number that can help in situations where we don't know what to do.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And that's the benefit of the training. Mental health first aid. Mental health first aid is a national program whereby you learn about the common mental illness disorders, the warning signs and symptoms, what are some protective factors, how to administer aid. And that aid can include the 211 resources. That aid can include, let's go for a walk. That aid can include, hey, I can take you, I can run your errands, right? But you learn all about that through this course. So you're learning how to administer, number one, recognize that someone is in crisis, and then how to administer aid until they're either able to get help, or in the event that you need to call 911 for help. I've taken the class. I was an instructor, and I most definitely see value in taking the class, and it'll be our pleasure to coordinate and pay for those classes. Classes are valued at $170 per class. And by the grace of God, we have received funding through various companies to help us to coordinate that training.
That's incredible. And that seems like training that all of us should be doing, even parents that are listening and they're like, oh, I just have little kids. Well, you never know as they grow up or other people that you encounter. We need to know what resources are out there and just how to handle these situations. And if we do that, if we spend the time doing something like that, we can save so many lives. I know that we can.
Absolutely.
If you're enjoying this episode of the One Girl Revolution podcast, please subscribe today on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts. We have a new inspiring episode coming out every single week, and you don't want to miss a single one. Subscribe to the One Girl Revolution podcast today. Where does stops go from here, Andrea? We are dreaming right now. So in your dream of dream worlds, 5 or 10 years down the line, what do you hope stops looks like? And, what are some things that you're working on right now?
Yeah, so what we're working on right now is we're trying to establish a local presence here where I'm at. I'm close to Charlotte, so we're in Charlotte, North Carolina. So we're trying to establish a local presence and also a national presence. So we're working on that. And another thing that we want to do is we want to align with some of the bigger nonprofits, such as the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention and NAMI and Mental Health America. We want to align with them through partnerships so that, we too can help raise resources and bring awareness so that we can help them accomplish their goals as well. So, we do have a 5-year strategy. That's to build. We do want to build our sisterhood, if you will. But we also have a worldwide strategy. And what I'd like to connect with sisters in other countries. And I'd like for us to collectively come together and come up with strategies on how we can, help our loved ones. Depression is the number one disability in the world. So I'd like for us to come together as sisters to operate in unity so that, and we envision a world, where women are mental health champions for themselves, for their families and for their communities, and have that impact, have a global impact, across the world. So that's what we envision.
Well, I hope that everyone who's listening, no matter where they are, if they're in the US or anywhere around the world, that they reach out, because we all can do something. And it really starts with a simple yes or a simple email to stops and just seeing where it goes. And at the very least, all of us can just be educated and share the 988 number and
Absolutely.
get involved. So that leads me to my next question for you.
Sure.
What can people do to support the work of STOPS, and what can they do to get involved?
Awesome. Great question. So they can follow us on social media. They can share our posts. We try to post the articles, I would say maybe, twice a week. They can reach out to us to get engaged and get training, and also donate. They can donate so that we can continue to, equip women with the training. So yeah, but yeah, they can reach out to us to get engaged with, the advocacy work efforts, and to also get engaged with events where we can raise funding for research.
Well, we can all do something. And I oftentimes say on this podcast that the free and easy way to support any cause, but also to raise awareness, is just to share on social media. So just to
Yeah,
follow,
yeah.
share that 988 number on
Mhm.
your social media. You never know who's going to see it. You don't even have to like
Yeah,
go seeking out people. You can just share that number, and you never know who might see it, or someone else will share it. It's like the ripple effect that
that's
all of
right.
us have that power. So
Mhm.
I encourage people to follow you on social media. I will put all
Thank
of those
you.
links in the show notes so people can easily get involved. And
Thank you for
yeah,
that.
I hope that everybody gets involved in the great work that you're doing at STOPS. Andrea, I'm curious about what's the root. This is about you. So if you could get to the very root of why you do what you do every single day. Suicide can be such a difficult issue, such a difficult topic to deal with. You're also dealing with difficult stories of human beings that are
Mhm.
just struggling, and even your own story. I know
Yeah.
it's really difficult, I'm sure, at times to talk about your own experience and your own story. But if you could get to the root of why you do what you do every single day, what would you say that root is?
I would say, I get a little emotional. My husband, my best friend, my first boyfriend, he felt that he had no other option. He felt that his life didn't matter, that he was of no value. He lived in darkness and just could not see his way out. And I remember several things happened before, on the last day that we were together, and he was having an episode. And I said, okay, I said, baby, I got you. And he calmed down. He goes, okay, okay, okay. So that told me, okay, give him some encouragement. I got you. I'm here. I got you. And then later on, when he calmed down, he said, if anything happens to me, you go get them. And I didn't, again, the furthest thing on my mind was suicide. So I took those words, go get them, to mean you go and you get others just like me, and you bring them. You do everything that you can to help bring them out of that darkness. And that's what I'm doing. I made a vow to myself that that's what I'm going to do. I'm semi-retired. I have, I say no shame in my game. I will talk openly. I don't have a problem with asking someone, if they're having thoughts of suicide. But I do this because the man that I was supposed to spend the rest of my life with took his life. I'm thankful I've remarried since. I have a wonderful, supportive husband. And you can about imagine, I would think it'd be difficult to come in and be supportive of something like this. And he is right there next to me, helping me, encouraging me, because I too can get dark. So I make sure that I surround myself with people who can lift me up out of that darkness. But that's why I do what I do. I feel that Eric said, "Go get them," and by the grace of God, that's what I'm doing with the help of others. With the help of others.
That's what I love so much about this podcast, is really, one woman sharing her story, but it really is an army. We all need to build community, a support system around us, because we do all have these dark moments in life and struggles that we need to have community and support, and just to have the people that we can call at a drop of a hat and say, I'm
Yeah.
struggling. I need something. I just need to be with someone. I need to sit with someone, right? We all have those
Yes,
dark
yes,
moments.
yes, yes, absolutely, absolutely. And that's what the sisterhood is all about. The sisterhood, whether we are close to one another, whether we're texting each other, or whether we're in a Zoom, it's just knowing you're not alone. And more than likely, I've experienced what you've experienced. I may have not gone through the actual physical incident that you went through, but I most definitely have experienced the emotion that you're going through. So it's being able to relate to one another and to uplift one another. And again, share our coping strategies. How are you coping? Let's talk about how we're coping. So we're really excited. We're really excited, and just can't wait to see where God's going to move us next.
Well, I can't wait to continue to follow everything that you're doing. I'm so
Awesome.
honored to have had you on the podcast. And I
Thank
know that
you.
we're going to stay in touch. We're going to find ways that we can
Absolutely.
collaborate on so many different things in the future,
Absolutely.
Andrea, because you are just such a beacon of light. And so is Stops, and we can all do something. So I encourage everybody to check out your website, donate if you
Awesome.
can, get involved in the work that you're doing. Before I let you go, I always end this podcast on 2 questions. So
Okay.
I'll start with the first one. You are a one girl revolution. That's why I wanted to have you on this podcast. You are a beacon of light, changing the world every single day. But who is a woman or girl that inspires you? Who is a one girl revolution in your life?
This individual, I think of, her name is Susie Jennings, and she's the founder and president of Operation Care International. And her organization served the homeless community and, poor children who are in the Dallas area and in nations around the world. And her husband died by suicide. And she, just like I, was having a deep conversation with God. What do you want me to do? What do I need to do? And he said, look over to your left. I don't know if it was to the left or to the right, but you see those people underneath the bridge? You go buy blankets for them. And she was obedient and did what God told her to do. So her painful tragedy has turned into like a worldwide outreach ministry. And, she gives hope. Her ministry gives hope to the homeless. And that's what we want to do. We want to give hope to, our loved ones who are living with a mental illness. So I consider Susie Jennings to be a one girl revolution.
She is, and so are you. And the sisterhood continues to build in One Girl Revolution. I'll have to have Susie on the podcast because she sounds like
That'd be
such an
great.
incredible woman.
That'd
Last question for you, Andrea, before I let you go, is if you could leave women and girls around the world with one message, what would it be?
And actually, it'd be two. The first would be, to figure out how God can use you to be a blessing. And I went through this exercise to kind of determine what's my purpose, what's my calling. And in going through that calling or that exercise, I determined that my calling is to serve and encourage a broken world through my nonprofit. So I would figure out how God can use you as a blessing, and you are more than welcome, anyone who's listening, to reach out to us if you want to know the process that I used. And I think the next one, I saw this quote, and I'm going to read it verbatim because it just resonated with me. Be the kind of woman who, when your feet hit the floor in the morning, the devil says, oh no, she's up. Right? Be that woman. Oh no, she's up. Then you know that God's using you to be a blessing.
Well, I love that quote so much. I'm so glad that you shared that one because I have seen that on different things. And every time I see it, I'm like, Yes, that's the type of woman that I want to be every single day. And you are being that, Andrea. And I'm so
Thank you.
grateful to know you and to get to
Aw.
have you on the podcast. Thank you so much for being on the One Girl Revolution podcast. And thank you for all the incredible work that you do.
Thank you so much for having us. Thank you so very much. And, thank you for having this platform for women to share their stories and the wonderful work that they're doing in the world. And I can't wait to see what God has in store for you.
Oh, thank you so much, Andrea.
You're welcome.
For more from One Girl Revolution, to listen to all of our podcast episodes, watch our Emmy-nominated documentary series, follow us on social media, donate to our nonprofit organization, and more, please visit onegirlrevolution.com. That's the number onegirlrevolution.com.